All right. Let's see here. Welcome, everyone. How am I doing on volume in the back there? Everybody's, yeah, thumbs up. Thumbs up from some key people back there. I love it. All right. Well, perfect. There you go. There we go. Little bit louder. If I get closer here. There we go. How's that sound for everyone? Okay, perfect. Up here, it's thunderous, so I'm hoping it's traveling back there. Perfect. Welcome, everyone, to the presentation on physical facility penetration testing, one of the more fun subjects, I think you would agree. This is a big moment for me. RVAsec was actually my first ever exposure to the realm. The monthly meetups, it was a big deal, so this is a big moment for me. What do you think? I was proud of that. Yeah. So for the love of, there we go. All right, so introductions. My name is Ariyan Suroosh. Everyone's welcome to call me Ari. I am a senior security consultant at Optiv with the attack and penetration team. It's going on almost 5 years now, and lucky enough, Optiv is one of the shops that offers the physical side, which is always something I was always very, very excited about. I do have my bachelor's in information security from U of R. I think there were a couple representatives here, so that program, get with me if you have any questions. Surprisingly amazing, actually, over there. And a couple of little social medias. Not a big social media guy, but there's an option. So in terms of agenda, kind of what I want to go over, this might be a little bit different from what you would imagine. I'm going to try to stray away from a lot of the kind of anecdotes and little war stories. Not that those don't have a place, but I was actually aiming for this to be a little bit more of an actual guide. If you've never done physical penetration testing, if you've just been curious about it, any of those things, my goal was that you're actually going to come away with a pretty good idea of how this would go down if you were going to deliver one on next week, like I will be in California. So agenda-wise, we're going to be covering client expectations, and then the 2 reconnaissance phases, as well as initial access. Badge cloning will be a big part of this as well, and then, of course, the post-exploitation phase. So in terms of client expectations, one could argue this is the most important slide up here because of the fact that without them, if we get out of scope, these go sideways really, really quickly. So, the big thing here is that we're trying to figure out, we're discussing at length what is in scope and what is out of scope. Clients, if you've ever been on a call with having to do with one of these, a physical test, there is always a lot of assumptions. There are a lot of miscommunications. There's a lot of different ideas of what it is that we're going to be doing. And what is dangerous is when you get out of line with something that they saw coming, it's a big deal. So if they didn't know that you were going to go around jiggling on doorknobs and trying to slide things through there, it's a big deal. If they counted on that and you just walked through an open door because an employee left it open, that's a big deal. So you really want to get really, really in line with exactly what it is they are expecting of you. And in addition to the methods of access that you'll be covering, the evidence that they want you to collect, the hours that they consider in scope, and of course, how much or how little they want you to interact with their employees. The biggest thing is the criteria for success. What is it that they're looking for? What are they even testing? Is it purely the new employee security awareness protocols that they put into place? That they have the little signs that say no tailgating with a little pig crossed out? Is that what they're testing? Possibly. Or are they more interested in seeing if someone can walk up at 2 a.m. and slide something through the door and get in that way? So you're trying to determine all of that, and it's really important that on that call you are also just really drilling in and setting the expectations for them as far as what they can expect. And then, of course, try to ensure that the contacts are available after hours. It's right there in the contract that they have to be. They seldom are. Luckily, I haven't had to contact one of them yet after hours. But when we've tried for, maybe reporting on, hey, we just got in, we just got out, they weren't available. It's upsetting, but it's sadly how it goes most of the time. And then, of course, the documents that you super, super need, the most important ones, are the LOA, the letter of authorization, That is by far the most important because that's your classic get out of jail free. That illustrates everything as far as the contacts, all of the information there. And then, of course, the third-party consent form if they do not own the building. That's a big one, too. Oddly enough, that's always the hardest one to get a hold of as well, for whatever reason. But once you get a hold of those, that's fine. Does anybody recognize the image that I put up on here? It's kind of a cool one, a little bit of history. This is a letters of marque and reprisal, and one could say it's kind of history's first LOA because back in olden times, these privateers actually got permission from the Queen to go out and sail the seas and actually work as pirates, but they had the letters of marque and reprisal to let them know, like, oh, this is actually part of the agreement here. So I put that little image in there. It's a little Easter egg for you, you history buffs. So remote reconnaissance. It's strange thinking that something that's so onset oriented would actually be the most important phase, but I would argue it is. It's definitely where I spend the most of my time. When it comes to the remote reconnaissance, the most helpful information that you're going to get oftentimes is just remotely. I would always argue that this is the most important information gathering stage because it's during the online reconnaissance that you're able to get a really good idea of what their badges look like. That's a huge one. And you're able to get really good pictures of it most of the time because if they're really, really proud of their new position, they're going to have it right there on social media. A little trick I picked up from a coworker who's a little bit more adroit with social media. You don't go to the site for the company thinking you're going to get anything. You go to their hashtag, and that's the people who are posting what they're not in such control of. That's usually a treasure trove of people being like, first day, there, it's just right there, every delicious pixel right there, perfect. And then of course, how do they dress? You're trying to get an idea of how do I blend in if I'm trying to blend in, which we'll cover later, because oftentimes, most of the time, even I would argue, I've had a lot more luck not blending in and doing something different. But that's a big thing there. And then of course, as you're looking at satellite images of their facility, trying to get an idea, are they multi-tenant? You would probably go into it knowing that. But is it gated entry? Is there a really helpful directory that points everything out? Because obviously sometimes clients are a lot more black box about letting you know where and what. They can't be but so black box because you can't be knocking on doors on multi-tenant buildings and trying to get better ideas of who's who. You have to know. But that's what you're looking for there. What is the building surrounded by? Where are you going to park to do a lot of your on-site recon? Are there a lot of opportunities? Is it a floating island like some of these are? I mean, there's some of these buildings that are just kind of so tucked away that there's really no way you can sit and park. You have to just drive by, zoom on by, and hope that you get some information. And then, of course, as far as entry points, do they have a loading bay? Do they have a lot of side doors? Do they have the main entrance? A lot of these companies, they put a lot of their features right there in the main gateway, and then the back and all of that is just completely open. So as far as, turnstiles, so you want to get as much of that information as possible, and then based on that original on-site reconnaissance, that's when I'm forming my plan A, B, C. I'm just, really kind of going into it. I'm trying to think, okay, this one's going to be tricky. They're only on the 7th, 8th floors of this 20-story building. How do I want to go about it? And that's oftentimes when I'll start, ordering polos that are specific to the client, or I'll start making polos from scratch. Again, something we'll cover later. But it's really online reconnaissance that I get the most done. This is a good example of kind of what I'm looking for. So if this was the target, which this is a stock image. It's not like a client or anything, so don't get wild. You didn't catch me. But so this is what I would be looking for. Okay, that's where the employees park. Okay, so there's potential entry points, one way in, one way out on the skylights. I'm not sure why I highlighted that actually. I've never gone through the skylights. It hasn't come to that. Coming through B1. So this is also often an image that you would find in the actual report for the client, is just letting them know, like, this is what's completely available. This is what I was able to see. This is how I went about things. Then when it comes to on-site reconnaissance, like I said, counterintuitively, there's actually just a lot of confirmation on what I found during the on-site. So, for example, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to confirm the entry points. A lot of the time, Google Maps is a little outdated. What was once a construction site is now a full-blown building, or vice versa. Sometimes it kind of changes around a lot. So you're confirming that. You're also going to confirm the current dress code, because oftentimes you are seeing, picture days from maybe more of a casual day or something along those lines, but you want to confirm that. And then you're confirming, probably most important of all, the badge information. The best case scenario is when you already found a badge, it's great, you already have a really good idea of what it looks like, and then when you're on site, you're just like, okay, cool, yeah, that's their current badge, great. Because if you're on site and you're trying to get a picture of the badge, then it's a whole other thing. It's like that's like a day right there, most of the time. So like we go into here, when you're looking for the new information, if you have not found what the badge looks like, that's going to be your number one mission. That's usually like a full day one, because obviously it's tricky to position yourself in a way that you're able to whip out the camera that's got the zoom, which I will go over as well, and really get a clear picture that's so clear you're able to then make a copy of that. That's the trick. It's like, yeah, you can eyeball it and you can be like, okay, name up top, but it's the details. So you're also, of course, trying to observe how many employees are coming and going, and when. Do they have a big lunch crowd that completely exits the building? Are they big into holding the door? One person badges in and holds the door for the rest of them. You're looking for the crowds, and you're looking for, what can I do? Can I blend in? Does that make sense too? And then, of course, you're trying to identify the most used entrances or exits. Maybe you want to go in through the most used. Maybe you want to stay away from the most used, depending on your, the scenario that you're kind of coming up with. And then you're trying to identify break and smoking areas. Yeah, it's about what you think. There's not as many smoking areas. There's not as many people smoking. That's not really going to be a great way. Also, smoking being what it is, big conversation point. You bond over it. You kind of take your break. That can get you into trouble too. So something to keep in mind there. See, there's going to be helpful tips kind of sprinkled throughout this. So, and then, of course, you're trying to observe the security awareness culture, and that's what I mean by the whole, this one person opened the doors. How seriously do they take it? Because sometimes you will arrive on site and one person will badge and slam it shut, and the next person will badge. At least that's what they say. I've never seen that, but that's the thing. Have a drone. Now's your chance, if you feel you must. Because I'm not big into the drones. I can see if you own one wanting to use it and feeling that that's the right choice. But I mean, raise your hand if you know how loud a drone is. It's the loudest possible thing, other than this speaker by my head, to myself. But it's numbingly loud. So it's something to keep in mind. Plus, that's a whole other thing in terms of getting it, registered. Camera-wise, so this is my camera. It's got roughly the same size sensors like an iPhone, so it's not going to take like astonishing photos. But what it can do is zoom. So when I first got this thing, I was standing on the roof of my apartment building. Okay. That speck is my friend who had a badge on her hip. And that's the zoom. That's where we're at now with cameras. So, obviously the zoom can get more carried away if you have like external, but as far as like the P90, or the P900 or the P1000, that's the kind of zoom you're talking about. When you're first starting, especially in all of this, you're thinking how, and what is the best way that I can observe from a far distance. And you're going to go through some phases. You're going to go through your binocular phase. You are going to go through, stupid thing. You're going to go through a monocular phase, the single monocular, thinking that that's the way to do it. You might go full telescope and just try to do it that way. But in the end, you're going to find your way back to the camera for one simple truth, and that is you can take a picture with it. And that's the biggest thing, because no matter how zoomed into the badge you can get, and you're like, oh, I got you now. Blue rectangle there, okay. You come away, you come to the Word document, you're ready to make the badge, and blue had something to do with it, and that's about it. With a picture, not only are you going to be able to put that in the report and say this is how easy it was or hard or whatever, but you're also going to be able to make a much more convincing replica. Now, when it comes to initial access, really what it comes down to is three options. Three kind of umbrella options. So, of course, the one that you're picking, if the client says whatever, it's all in play, it's all in scope, however you can get us that way. Then you have all the three of these options. And really, they kind of break down into social engineering or tailgating, surreptitious entry, my favorite. I'm half right that it's spelled correctly, I don't know. And then authenticated entry / badge cloning. So let's take a deep dive into door number 1. This is a former coworker of mine, Savannah Lazar. She's a legend. This little chain of events makes it seem like she's been pen testing since she was like 15, but I don't know what that photo is. But this is a good example of badges throughout time. So you are making really, really convincing ones. And the thing is that you don't really need a ton of what you're picturing is maybe going to Kinko's and laminating. And sure, that is an option, but you don't have to. The thing is that you really can go to Amazon and just start picking up supplies as soon as you know that you're going on one of these. And all you're doing is printing the ID on the sticker paper. You are cutting that out, sticking it onto the card. And remember, this is badge replication, not cloning. So this is a credential that doesn't do anything. Hopefully, you do have a card that will beep, so it does have the capability, but it's not actually, you didn't clone it. And sometimes that's fully out of scope, and they don't want you to clone it. So the thing is that all you're doing is sticking it to there. You're using the card punch. If you are not using a card, you could use a hotel key if it's come to that. And then you're just placing the sticker on there, cutting it out, and then the key is the Gorilla Tape, because the Gorilla Tape gives it that sheen, that shine. And then 99% of the time, different places have the card holders, and that card holder just makes it look so much more realistic because you can't really see through that anyway. You get the glare off of the card holder, the plastic bit. So it looks great. I mean, if you're totaling this up, $10, $4, $6, for under $100, you can make one of these. You can do any of these badges, and indeed, it's pretty effective. So the big thing with pretexting and tailgating, that you're really considering 3 things, and you have to get 3 things right. 3 things have to align. Because you're going to find when you first start this that a lot of these will check off maybe 1 or 2 boxes, but not all 3. So the first thing is what will get you in the door. That's the big part. So a lot of times when you're kind of thinking of ideas, and especially like the really fun ones, like I'll dress up as like an elf and do like a Christmas card thing in person. Like that'll get you through the door, maybe, but it won't check off those other boxes. So with this one, are you impersonating an employee, or is it better to go third party? That's what you kind of have to ask yourself. Now, there was a time that employee was always the way to go. Really, COVID / post-COVID is when that became sometimes the worst one that you could do. Number one, there's fewer employees on site at any given time. And a lot of the time, employees kind of lock in their time. So it's like, hey, there's 10 of us on Tuesdays, and you're not one of them. So if you pretend to be one, it's going to be a little bit different. Also, if you expect to get a little bit of pushback or interaction with someone, then maybe employee is not the right choice because you're not going to know the right things to say. Third party introduces a lot of that kind of plausible deniability, that kind of haziness and confusion, because it's only when they're 100% sure you don't belong there that you're really going to get in trouble. Beyond that, it's always just going to be squinty eyes, and that's as far as it's going to go. Then, second box you want to check off, what will allow you to walk around? Because obviously you're not going to have that good of an idea of what the inside looks like. A lot of clients go out of their way to make sure that nobody's repeating their environment. So you're going to be going in there, and you're not going to have an idea what's what, where the bathrooms are, where's the conference. A home. I walked into a gym. I was like, this is going to go nowhere. I got a quick set in, and then I walked right out. So it's not going to go anywhere. So the thing is that you're going to walk around, and whatever your pretext is has to be something that allows you to kind of vibe around the office. Okay, so like I said, elf costume, you're going to have too much attention on you. Ladder is another classic one. The old ladder TikTok that'll get you in the door, that'll get you into the concert. It's not going to allow you to walk around cubicles. There's going to be too many eyes on you. So that's a big thing. And then, of course, when you're considering time of day and your pretext, what's going to allow you to kind of walk around? And then what will allow you to stay? So if you can line up all 3 of those perfectly, then you will have gotten in through the door, you would have walked around, figured out where there is a empty, unused conference room, sat down, plugged in directly to the Ethernet port, and begun testing. And if you can demonstrate like, hey, guys, yeah, I entered your building. I went to the break room. I got a coffee. I sat down. I knocked out some work. Honestly, I did some other emails as well, just while I was there. And then I walked out. The client will be like, wow, okay, let's talk about how to mitigate all of our issues. And then, of course, use real name, question mark? Weirdly enough, yeah, probably should. Why? Why would I use my real name? That seems counterintuitive. Well, I'll tell you. Because I have the documentation to support my real name. I have my license. I have that sort of thing. So when you do get pushback, and pushback you may get, it's way, way better to just be able to be like, yeah, that's me, because the alternative is getting burnt immediately. So to answer the question that's on all of your minds, no. So far I have not been burnt. I have not had to reveal my LOA, not once. Have I had pushback? I appreciate that, thank you. Have I had pushback? Have I been denied access? Have I been told, I don't know about that, go back downstairs, something like that? Of course, for sure. But there's never been a full burning where I have to be like, look, please, I have a family, here's the LOA, you can't do this to me, that sort of thing. It hasn't come to that. So using your real name prevents something that I'll go into later on, which is a full burning. So when it comes to coming prepared, you got to bring the tools for interior door compromise. So another thing to kind of consider is having enough tools and being prepared to actually keep going. Go in through the HR doors, go into the CISO's office, whatever you can do. You want to be prepared for that. So you have to bring your shims, your traveler's hooks, things that I'll cover in later slides. I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'll feed you baby birds. And then when it comes to having your phone settings that allow you to record everything. So I have a privacy screen on my phone, and I justify that to my girlfriend because of this, because of being able to have it at an angle and having it turned down enough to where when I'm actively recording to get knowledge, the security guard doesn't notice that I'm recording and instantly burned. So those are two great things. Long sleeves and layers whenever possible. Layers, of course, not always going to be possible, but long sleeves, dang it, that came in so handy last week. Oh man, long story short, I did slip a flipper up my sleeve and captured a clone. It was amazing. I'll be chasing that high for the rest of my life. But the long sleeves was completely inadvertent. It just happened to be a long sleeve Johnson Controls shirt that I figured would get me in. And then it ended up opening those possibilities. So I added this like 2 days ago. I added this bullet point because long sleeves do really give you more options. And then, of course, keeping an eye out for company polos and uniforms on eBay. So obviously, a lot of these companies do have kind of external-facing stores that you can just buy whatever for some reason. Otis, that apparel is actually very high quality. It's actually great stuff. But it also has Otis written all over it, so it makes for a compelling pretext. Something to keep an eye out for is some of the rarer companies that don't have external-facing AWS cloud services. I may have picked up recently. That's going to be a compelling one. I'll let you know when I use it. But that's the thing, is that if you keep your eye out for legitimate company uniforms, those go so far in terms of building the verisimilitude for someone to be like, yeah, maybe, and then you're in. Third point here, loosey-goosey, baby. You are really trying to, you want to go in with a plan, you want to have contingency plans, you want to have all of that, but above all, you just kind of want to roll with it. You want to have a plan for getting turned down, but then you want to have a plan to surround that. And honestly, the most valuable thing I have in this presentation is this last point. Never be the person who knows what's going on. Be the guy who is waiting on the guy who knows what's going on. Case in point, I'm an HVAC guy, but I don't know how to speak the language. I know air handler, and that one's gotten me in a couple times, but beyond that, I'm gonna hit a wall. I also don't have a real work order. I don't know who a contact would be. I don't know any of that stuff. But my supervisor, who's right around the corner, he's on his way. I've been texting him all day long, spoof card, texting myself. He's on his way, and he has the answers. I beat him here. What can we do? Now, if the security guard is lax enough, oh, yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, it has been hot. Air handlers right up those stairs. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, yeah, man, I don't have a work order. Shoot, I'm sorry, buddy. Yeah, no worries, man. Rick, I'll get back together with him later on. No problem. See ya. And then you just went from complete access to, at the very least, information gathering. Both are good. Both are very necessary because most of the time that information gathering is like the most valuable day that you can have other than getting in. So that's the big thing that never fails me, but don't be the person who should have answers because you're not going to have any answers. And then as they ask questions, as they talk to you, you're not going to have anything to back it up. You're going to get nervous too because you don't know, and then that's going to be a burning LOA. Some of my facades. I've got some work glasses. I have quite a wardrobe now. I don't mind telling you, it's come a long way. So I have options, but yeah, each thing is kind of building up into it. HVAC, repairman, all of that, classics, Ocean's 11 stuff, but it's all really good because most of the time you do get access. People do leave you alone once you start, your zesty magic, once you start working on the air handle or whatever you're doing. And most importantly, you get a tool bag. You get a free bag of stuff. So I put in some legitimate looking things. I have a temperature gun and an anemometer for measuring airflow, to whip out. But then I also have a double door tool, a couple shims, a couple of things, my flipper zero. So being able to carry a tool bag and getting away with it is magic, and I love it. So let's cover surreptitious entry. This one's the one you came for. This is a good one. Surreptitious entry. If it's an option at all, it is not only my favorite one, but it is usually the best one in terms of risk and reward. What do I mean by that? Well, for one thing, the advantage is you can quickly determine if it's going to happen or not. When you're outside there, you're going to get a pretty good idea of do they have double doors? Is that going to be an option? Do they have the rec sensors that are vulnerable? You're going to get a pretty good idea most of the time, even online, whether or not it's even going to be a possibility. And then, of course, this one is the one that clients do get a little antsy about. So you do want to really drill in that, like, hey, I'm going to try to get in there at 2 a.m. and walk around. Are you guys okay with that? And you do emphasize the fact that you're never going to do anything destructive. None of us will ever do anything that leaves the building less secure than when we went in, and that always rules destruction completely out. Except when you pop doors off the hinges, beware of the magnet bars because sometimes they'll get off kilter and then you won't be able to pop them back in, and you'll just have to gingerly lay the pins down beside the door and egress. But then you call the POC and let them know, like, hey, there's a door in the inside of your gym that I popped off the hinges. Sorry about that. But it shows effort, and they liked my style. So usually, here's the big thing. Usually very few, if any, staff are on site. If you get access at 2 a.m., you have the place to yourself, provided you didn't trip an alarm. But you're just kind of walking around. You can do all sorts of things, take pictures of everything, go through filing cabinets, go through all of that. It also gives you the option of doing something really awesome, which is going into the security desk, which oftentimes has contractor badges, guest badges of varying credential level. Sometimes they have temporary badges that allow access to the IT or the HR. So then you're able to get into even more access when you're actually inside. It's great. And then of course you're carrying out tons of post exploitation without resistance because you're just you have the run of the place. Disadvantages are substantial. I can't downplay them. If you get caught in some of these positions, you're going to have an extra hard time explaining your way out of. You will go right to jail right away. If you do trip an alarm and you don't know it, police officers will be on their way, and it's a bigger thing. Luckily, it has not happened to me, but that's a very, very, very real possibility with surreptitious entry. And then considerations-wise, you still do want to make sure that if someone walks up or finds you or something, you have a reason. You have something going on. So I say dress with a pretext in mind. Go the HVAC route. Go the Otis elevator repair route. Go with something that still gives you that plausible deniability. Because remember, that percentage of someone who actually can take action is higher than you think. Nobody's going to take action at 60% sure you're bad news. It has to be higher than that. Tools-wise, these are some of my favorites. So you've got your double door tool, a classic one, so great. The mica shims, really, really fantastic. The pump wedge is amazing, actually. So when you can't get the double door tool quite through that crack, the pump wedge does a fantastic job of finishing the deal. And then, of course, you have your traveler's hook of varying lengths. Some of them are designed to, get past the little guard. And then you have really the only picks that I ever bring with me. These are the Bogota picks, and they work kind of yin and yang with each other, just in terms of raking. When it comes to lock picking, my lock sport, I'm sure a lot of you can identify with this, is not good enough to pick an exterior door or anything 5 pins and above. I'm going to be there all night long. It's not realistic. It doesn't make as much sense. So instead, I carry these 4 filing cabinets for little drawers, the little 2-3 pin, like Little Sister's Diary style locks, where it's just you can get right in there. I mean, you can stick a nickel in and turn it, that sort of lock. That's what you're going to be picking on site, because there's just too much going on for you to actually really get it done. Especially when you start out and you've got that like excitement, the adrenaline, your ears are hot. You just can't. You're not going to pick it. You're not going to pick anything. At least I won't. This is my least favorite tool. This is the worst tool ever. I hate it. Yes, it's very effective at doing what it does. This is the under the door tool.
You run across the hall?
Oh man. You know it. But yeah, this one is a hassle. So not only do you have to bend it and unwind it from whatever backpack it's been slowly stretching out for as long as you've kept it still, but the thing is, it is the loudest and most obnoxious tool to use too. So if you're not doing surreptitious entry, if you don't have your run of the place, there's anyone, janitors, security, just anyone walking around, they see this thing slide up under the door, instant. I mean, there's no excuse for that. There will never be an excuse. You're busted, you're done. It's also the loudest possible thing. I hate it. I hate it. But I carry it because every once in a while, that server closet is vulnerable to one tool only. And that fucking thing. So, what I mean by, dressing for a pretext in mind, this is what I mean. Layers. This is my classic proletariat jacket. It's amazing. I love that thing. My Otis elevator repair hat. And, I'm just kind of ready. That my pretext is, I came here about those elevators. My supervisor's on his way. I'm not sure which one I'm looking for here. And then I've got my tool bag, of course, because, like I said, so handy to be able to bring one of those with me. Now, when we're digging into authenticated entry and badge cloning, this is kind of heavy, so we're going to kind of brush through some of this, but the information is there if you end up looking into it deeper. But this one is completely devastating if successful. If successful, you've officially cloned a badge. You have just as much access as the person that you cloned the badge from. A lot of clients are very slow to get to a point where they're so granular about their access controls that you have different groups and different people that can access anything. Most of the time, John Q. Public can access exactly what the CEO can, and there's no distinction. So often grants a level of access above all of the other methods. You can access any part of the building. It looks great. Especially when you combine it with a replicated badge and it actually looks legitimate, it all just kind of flows together because nobody is really going to talk to you no matter what if you have a badge and the badge is working. Somebody, you badge in front of someone, you could stop them and ask them the badge behind them because of policy. So a few factors to consider if this one is the best play. Number one, it does require an environment that allows that to even happen. Now, that is actually a little bit less important of a point because of what we'll go into, because you do now have more interesting options. But there was a time that walking around and getting close to people was just really, really difficult, if even at all possible to do. Like I said, we kind of flow back around to the whole populations of these places just being less now. So it's much more difficult to kind of walk around with a satchel and get close to people. That's a big post-COVID thing. Is it even possible to clone? Anything above I-Class SE is going to be pretty much ruled out. So if you can rule that out and you say, all right, they're using purely high frequency and it's above I-Class, they're not using the migration reader, so I can't even do a downgrade attack, that's it. I do have slides for everything I just kind of mumbled through. But that's the big thing. And then, of course, does the client have alerts set for badge swipes? That almost got me burnt because they started to pay attention to me because I swiped my badge, my cloned badge, through the garage door, not realizing that the contractor badge that I had didn't have access to the garage. So I swiped it one more time, okay, not working, backed my car out and left. And that's actually when the security started paying attention to me. They didn't buzz me or anything, they didn't catch me, but they were paying attention to me because of that misswipe. So that's an important one. What can you do to detect that? Very little, but just keep it in mind. And then, of course, the recently released Stealth Reader, Evil Twin, can potentially alleviate a lot of those things, which we'll go over. So when we're talking about badge cloning tech and the kind of the whole thing, it is a lot. There's a lot of information there. It was its own talk. That's actually where this talk came from. Started out with this one, but it requires badge technology that is vulnerable to badge cloning. So you're talking low frequency, you're talking I-class, and you're talking I-class SE that can be downgraded. So that's going to depend on a ton of different factors. When you're looking at the reader, the frequency, the credentials, the chipset, the format, and now there's actually one more thing to kind of worry about, and that is, did they switch from WGAN to OSDP? That's another thing to consider that I have on another one. But the big thing is, and a lot where this came from is when I was starting to do these, I wanted to be able to look at a badge reader and know exactly what I was up against and what I needed to go back to, and I wanted to be like, oh yeah, that's the T55. I'm going to go back and get that, but that's not possible, and that's actually by design. So I'm not going to read that. It's for the people who read these later on. But this is basically the excerpt from the HID white paper that explains why you can never look at a badge reader and know exactly what's going on, and that is because they are trying to keep that information away. It's not going to give that away, so they don't want you to know that they're using one particular thing and that's all that thing is capable of. There's different configurations on the other side, on the actual server side. So when it comes to the timeline, it kind of starts out in the 1980s with the magstripe, everyone's favorite magstripe. Better than manual locks and keys regarding the actual management and traceability and forensics of the different credentials, better than keys that way, but of course unencrypted, it's just the number sliding onto the machine, that's it. Then, of course, when it comes to the 1990s, we introduced prox cards, and we introduced the low-frequency 125 kilohertz RFID. And that's, of course, the classic one that I adore because it's still, it's all around. A ton of companies have it. And it's just clear text. It's got one function, and that one function is to just basically burp out a credential. And as soon as it gets close to a reader, that's all it does. It burps that out. And it's unencrypted, it's static, it's red in the clear, it's just a number that flies through space and time that you can snatch up, no problem. In the 2000s came the high frequency, the 13.56 megahertz, near field communication, the NFC chips. And that is actually really terrific. It's mutual authentication. It introduced, a lot of the cryptographic keys and a lot of the kind of cryptography that we're finally able to introduce to our credentials. And most first-gen cards, this is the negative, have exposed vulnerabilities within the actual authentication algorithm that allowed for them to be tweaked. As soon as you have like a prox mark, you're able to reverse it and get a hold of it, and you're good to go. In the 2010s came the second generation. These are the ones where things are a little bit trickier. Like I said, there are a couple of little downgrade attacks and whatnot if they are using I-class SE, but for the most part, you're in trouble once you get up into this range. And then when it comes to the present, future, and that sort of thing, then you're actually moving away from the form factor of having a little dangly badge hanging from your belt. Now you're moving into swiping your phone. And that's, I don't have to explain to you, that's tougher. That's going to be way tougher to clone. I'm confident in us as a community to come up with a way to still get them, but that's going to be tough for sure. And then, of course, the reason why this timeline is even something we're discussing is the fact that it's still completely valid. You'll still see the different levels all the time because it breaks down like this in terms of money. So a lot of the time, the older companies who don't have the money to switch over 1,000 employees to the next credential, because if you're looking at the price, they're not much one by one. But if you're talking about just the exponential numbers that they would need to switch over, it's an incredible sum. And sometimes they just don't feel like that's a risk. Part of what we're doing when we deliver on one of these is demonstrating, no, it very much is, because I could access your server closet from the parking lot just by walking in. But this is kind of how it breaks down in terms of money. I'm going to breeze through some of these for the sake of time, but essentially there are some different things to kind of now worry about in terms of the communication from the reader to the back end to the server, in terms of kind of moving over from WGAN, which it uses the WGAN effect, which is actually really cool, science. And then, of course, the big thing is that this is unilateral communication and it lacks the security protocols. When the reader is taken off the wall or disconnected, whatever, there's nothing calling back. Because it's basically proving a negative. It's not communicating at all until a badge is read. Without that, there's nothing. And then, of course, with OSDP, the Open Supervised Device Protocol, now you're introducing some encryption and, more importantly, bidirectional communication. So what can we tell from looking at this reader? Like I said, very little. You've seen this one. This one's very classic. It's got maybe a little sticker, maybe a little bit of branding based on who they got it from in terms of vendor. But there's not much that you can tell from this. You're only looking at the fact that it's a migration reader, and in that case, you are often looking at a client that's transitioning from their first gen to maybe the second gen higher frequency cards, but they need to be able to support both because oftentimes they can and have been convinced to move on to high frequency, but it's going to take some time to actually make that move. So you're looking at a migration reader, far and away the most popular and seen kind of formatting because of the fact that we're still kind of in the midst of the changes. Oh yeah, I can clone whatever is. This is the one. That's what I'm going for anyway. Yeah, for sure. And then of course, when it comes to what information can we get from this, because this is the reader, so this is just sitting outside. Well, you can use some of the different techniques, such as this keychain or this little card from Dangerous Things. This will light up and tell you if it's the 1.25 kilohertz or the 13.56 megahertz, high frequency, low frequency. So that'll give you an idea. Then this arm is here because I do have chips that do the same thing implanted inside my arm. Yeah, this guy knows it. So yeah, I went a little bit crazy. How often do I use my arm, you ask? That's a fair question. I don't, ever. And here's why. It takes a lot to actually line up with the reader. And then I also, something I didn't consider, to see the LED that lights up, I have to basically see it in between it. So I don't use it. I use the keychain. That's the one I use. But I did get it implanted. Now it's just a party trick. Again, forgive me, I will have to touch on all of these a little bit quicker than perhaps I expected. But when it comes to the two, low frequency, essentially, that's the kilohertz wattage. And then you're talking about lower frequencies carry less data. That's the big thing, is they're just capable of carrying less, and they're trivial to clone. This is the one that you can just lay a flipper on one card, read, flipper on the next card, write, done, it's over, because, like I said, just burps the number, and that's it. But it's cheaper. That's why it's so common. That's why you still see it all the time. High frequency, able to carry more data. Some can be cloned, like I said, some can't. And you're talking about newer technology, it's more expensive. It takes a lot to kind of move over. And the biggest thing, of course, is that it supports cryptography. These are two examples of the long-range readers that you will have seen outside of like a garage or something where you're trying to kind of swipe something through and go through. These are the ones that we actually stick in a bag and hit the road and try to get the clone from someone. Doppelganger now allows, developed by Travis Weathers from Optiv and Physical Exploit, actually allows a lot of other possibilities now that I'm going to have to breeze right over. But this is now straightforward. Before, it was very, very complicated to kind of build this little back end, and you kind of had to use some, combined with open source, and it was also very expensive. To be clear, the badge reader itself is still very expensive. We're talking $800 at least, but it's now, as far as kind of getting this set up, it's a little bit more plug and play. But before, this was the worst. This was the worst part of my whole job. It was so difficult to kind of walk over and come up with an excuse to rub my satchel all over your body. Which is basically, that's really what it took. I mean, you had to be so close. We did so many demos, but getting it through, you had to basically touch. You had to touch their credential. Depending on where that credential was, depended on how uncomfortable everyone was. But, you had to come up with a situation that allowed you to get close to someone, walk past them, get close, touch all over them, and then, pop back up and try again, because sometimes it didn't work the first time. It was actually pretty unreliable in terms of it. So you had to, conversate, and then you dip back down. This is a terrible option. This is here as a warning, because essentially this would allow you to, in theory, to walk up to a reader and splice into the wiring and then intercept the credentials. A client's never going to let you do that. This slide doesn't even matter. We're going to go past it. With this one, this is the exciting stuff, because this is the new hotness. That reader is the one that we control. We can stick it on the other side of a door that already has one. We can stick it on a door that doesn't have one. Again, developed by Travis Weathers, the genius that he is. And it will beep just as if it's a regular reader. And it supports all of those. I mean, you're just sticking it on the wall, and then people will badge in. And he has assured me that you would be stunned with what people will badge into. I mean, you could stick this outside of a bathroom, and they'll be like, these people, man. Never stops. And then go in. I mean, it's it's pretty awesome. And then of course, it's exactly what you think it is. You walk back up, you take it down, and then you can just clone, all of those with a Proxmark. It's beautiful. Oh yeah, I've got to breeze over these things. This is heavy information. I've got a lot in here. It's more technical than you pictured, I can tell. So the thing is that, with the card credentials, card chipsets, card formats, these are all different terms. They are things to learn at another time. And then when it comes to the clonable card types, especially now with everyone who's doing all of the open source great work with flippers and with Proxmark, Iceman, more and more are getting kind of added to the list of, as far as what's considered in play as far as a clonable card. But the classics are kind of your MyFair Classic, your T5577, your HitProx. HitProx is probably the most common one, I would say. And then HitProx Card 2, that's another good one. Indala, rare here, more common in Europe, I hear tell. I don't know. And then EM4100, another very rare one, but again, considered in play. How can we still clone iClass? Well, this is kind of what I hinted at that one time, but essentially, it's possible to read it with the reader, so you can still capture it, and then you're able to write the facility ID, the facility ID to the iClass badge, and then it kind of works out in case, because if it's a migration reader, you're able to basically still badge in as if it's just the lower protected version. So that's how you're kind of able to still get away with it. But again, iClass SE is pretty tricky. And then when it comes to writing the credentials, obviously this could be a talk all its own, but you do have some options. You got the old Flipper 0. And then kind of a choice is Proxmark 3, the RDV4, but I would argue you kind of need both because they do different things. They specialize in different things. I'm now such a proponent of the Flipper 0 because of its ability to be slid up a sleeve. And then post-exploitation, just really quickly, you're looking for the evidence. Make sure you're taking pictures like crazy. It doesn't do you any good if you didn't, because the pictures are what end up in the report, and then that's what gets discussed. I've never had a client not believe something that happened, but I've also never given the opportunity. So, you don't want that pushback. And then, of course, we're looking back at their criteria for success. Did they want you to drop off a payload? Most of the time they don't, in my experience, but sometimes. Network access, or were they looking for you to just prove that you could get in, take a picture of something inside, have the timestamps, and say, I was in your building for 20 minutes. Sometimes that's all they're looking for. And of course, maximum allowable impact, that's the goal. Can't go past that. And then egress. It doesn't count as a success if you don't get out. That's the big one, which is always so much scarier than you think it would be, because you're just like, oh, they got me now. I've been in this conference room for 30 minutes. There's just no way. But it's fine. And then, of course, big rule there, leave nothing less secure than when you went in. That's the big one, because that will wipe all of your progress out pretty quickly. Summary, it's an art more than a science, that's fair. Take your time, get into character, and remember, you got an LOA, so that should make you feel a little bit better. You're not going to jail for any meaningful amount of time. Thank you to everyone here. Do we have time for questions? We have time for questions. Okay, who has a question? I'm gonna run over to you. There we go. Here you go.
How often do you actually see low frequency cards? Because I've yet to see any other than, I think, one building that I've witnessed.
Oh, fair. Yeah, let me say that. So we've had opposite experiences because I've seen, I would argue I've seen the majority of credentials these days, these cards are low frequency. Lucky enough for me. Probably because I guess we're just kind of hitting clients that are working with locations that have been around a lot longer, and they have a really hard time switching over. I think the most common ones, like I said, were like the migration readers, where you only have a few people that have the newer ones, but most of the employees going in and out have the oldest possible credentials. And you can tell, too, by looking at them, because they look physically older. They're worn down, they're weather worn. That's a great indication coming out of the gate that you're going to be able to, A, clone it, and B, that it's low frequency. So that part's been handy. Yes, sir. Biometrics. Oh, okay. What about biometrics? Good question. So for one thing, I don't see a ton of those. And when we do pretty quickly kind of write off the ability to clone anything, because a lot of the time with biometrics, they do have a backup credential for when their thumb isn't reading, because those are famously ornery when it comes to being able to get the read. But then we would definitely want to pivot to something else, because as of right now, biometrics are considered something that we can't really go after in a meaningful way. But that's a good question. Yes, sir.
How do you even get into this kind of thing? I mean, there's not a lot of job opportunities, and I can't even actually practice this on my own at home.
You're not wrong. You can, but the stakes are a little higher. But yeah, no, that's a very good question. He asked, how do you get into this? Well, the thing is that you do kind of have to, if this is a priority of yours, if this is something you really want to go after, nice. You do have to go after a company that offers it as a component or as an offering. So I got really lucky. Optiv, my company, has always offered it. It's always been a big thing with us because a lot of our clients are interested in their physical security, and so it's not hard. We get plenty of those. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, it's really something you can't really go after. If it does mean a lot to you, then you can slowly start to assemble some of your componentry, your costumes, your whatever. And then I would also recommend maybe take phone pretexting more seriously than you otherwise would have, because phone pretexting is no one's favorite. When you offer it at a company, you guys know, it's not your favorite. It's always a hassle. But if you go into it knowing that it's practice for physical security, you might find that it's a lot more fulfilling and it's a lot more fun, because you're like, all right, I got to get good at being super smooth, calm, collected, knock this out so that when the time comes and I do get a job at a shop that offers physical facility pen tests, I'll be ready and I'll wow them and I'm good to go. Because that's the hard part, is that it is one of those high risk, high things where if you fail the first couple times, your company might not do it as often. That's the only trick there. All right. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. That's it.